All right, if you could make your way back to your seats. Awesome. Well, we should just pray together just before we get into the sermon today. God, you're so good, and thank you so much for everything you do in our community. God, I've seen so many things online this week that have made me angry and made me weep over this nation. When we pay attention to the darkness, we forget about the light. God, it's so horrible out there, the things that people are doing, the things that people are saying. But God, when we look back at you, we forget about it. Because when we focus on you, we forget about the waves. So God, in this time, we're praising you. In this time, we're preaching your gospel, what you want to say. God, you're going to get the last words over all eternity. You're king. There's going to be a day when evil stops. There's going to be a day when there's no more trials. There's going to be a day when there's no more conflict, because you're going to take the throne of the entire world. And it says that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that you're Lord. Then and only then will this conflict stop. But God, in the meantime, you've called us to the world. God, you haven't called us to be separated. You called us to the world. You loved the world so much that you gave Jesus, but you also gave us to the world, Lord, to have us go reach the lost. God, that's our purpose. That's our plan. That's what we're supposed to do. God, give us the tools this morning. Give us some insight in how we can get this done, Lord. Jesus, would you just raise up a new generation of people that are passionate about you? God, for the children in this room, I just pray a special prayer. God, would you give them a deep passion for your spirit? Would you give them a deep passion for your word? God, would you raise up a generation that isn't afraid of the dark? God, would you raise up a new people who are excited to go out and minister? God, who are unafraid, who are unashamed of what the gospel means for them. God, I pray that we would stop as churches in the United States, stop giving up ground. God, for so long we preached the American message. For so long we preached this social justice message. But God, none of that will do. All of that is dust and it's dirt. The only thing that matters is you, God, is your kingdom. God, in this place, in this time, we preach that, Lord. Would you come and would you speak that to us this morning? In your name we pray. Amen. Well, how's everybody doing today? We doing good? Well, it's awesome. It's so awesome just to be able to be back up here. This week I kind of had a good time. I had some friends come down from my college that I used to know. All right, I still know them. One's from South Dakota, the other one's from Minnesota. So it was cool. I just got to spend some time with them. It was just, it's cool to know that those connections that we make are strong, especially in college. But for many of us, we walk around our lives and many of us are lonely at times, but God knows what you need. He knows you need friends, and he knows that you need good connections. And I was reminded of that when my friends came down. And for you, if you feel lonely and you feel like you don't have many friends, this is why we're here. We want to be your friends. We want to give you guys that good connection of knowing that I can step into this place and be who I am. And like I said at the very beginning of service, society and we in society put on different labels upon ourselves, and we wear it like a jacket everywhere we go. It's kind of like a Letterman jacket of, this is who I am, this is who I believe me to be. But when you walk into this place, you can take that jacket off. In this place, you can be who you were created to be. Like that first song that we sang, Who You Say I Am. This is what we preach in this church. You are who God says you are, and that's all we see you as. What we need to look at ourselves as is we're all equals in here. We're all sinners. But Jesus Christ looks at us and he says, no, you're my sheep. You're my children. You're not sinners. You're not orphans. You're my children. And I just want to say again, it's such a pleasure to be up here and preach. It's interesting because almost exactly 1 year ago, I was interviewing for a job in Minnesota. And before that, I was a telemarketer, and I was just, living life. And I felt like my wheels were spinning. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was 22 years old with no experience or anything, and I just felt like God was like, what are you doing? Go pursue the pastorate. I didn't create you to be a telemarketer. I don't know if he created anybody to be a telemarketer, But I just remember, I was like, okay, God, I just want to walk out in faith. And I knew some pastors in the Minnesota area, which is where I wanted to be. I wanted to live in Minneapolis, so I wanted to be one of those cool city kids. For as long as I can remember. And I just talked to this pastor, and I was like, hey, do you know of anybody that's hiring? And he said, it's really fortuitous that you asked me because my church is hiring. I was like, oh, cool, this is awesome. He said, yeah, we're going to try to hire a worship pastor. And at the time, I was like, I had just got back from college where their worship was very structured, is very professional, and as many of you know, that's not me at all. I'm not very professional or structured. So I was like, I don't know if I could be a good worship leader. It's not really my thing. But you know what? God is going to stretch us. He's going to take us into places where we don't understand. He's going to do stuff for us. And I was like, you know what? There's going to be some good tools I can pick up along the way. So I interviewed with him a number of times. And then finally on a Sunday, he said, all right, I want you to come up and I want you to lead worship. I said, awesome. All right, when's the practice? And our only practice was Sunday morning right before church. So it's kind of like a lot of pressure. I've never met these people. I've played these songs a handful of times. And now I'm going to be leading worship for this church that I've never been to in my life. And this is like the interview. This is the tryout. This is the time. You know what? And I was like, you know what? People are either burned by the fire or they're made by the fire. And I was like, I'm going to be made by the fire. So I get up there. We go through the practice. And it was so bad. It was so bad. But I had never played with these people ever. And during the midst of the practice, I was thinking, you know what? We're just going to try to get through these songs and then try to clean them up as we go. But the pastor said, all right, everybody stop. Samuel, come to my office. In that moment, my heart completely sunk. Like I was just thinking, man, I blew it. Man, this was my one shot. This was my one chance. I'm 22 years old. There's not going to be a lot of chances for me at this time. And I just remember there was just this feeling of guilt. There was this feeling of failure. But the most important thing was I felt absolutely embarrassed. I walked down off that stage completely humiliated. And I remember sitting in that pastor's office, and there's an old adage that says, don't let them see you cry. I definitely tried. A few tears got out, just enough to fill up a coffee mug, but it's all good. I just remember I was like crying, and I was like, man, I don't want to look weak in front of this guy, I want to look strong. I don't want to look vulnerable. But I just remember the tears just kept on coming, and I couldn't fight them back. And I had to go back up on stage and play guitar. I wasn't going to sing, but I was going to go back up and play guitar. And I was just like fighting so hard to do it. And the guy's trying to be nice about it. He's like, man, it's not you. It's you, he's like trying to calm me down. And he was like, hey man, I still want to be there for you. I'll mentor you if that's what you want. And I was like, man, you just kicked me off your stage. I don't think I want you to mentor me. But I was just like, man, this is so hard. And during the whole service, I was just sitting there and I was trying to listen to him preach. And I was trying to get into the worship. My heart was just completely out of it. I was so devastated. And I remember I got back into the car. And before I went back home to Cedar Rapids, I stopped by a familiar place to me. It's called St. Paul's Cathedral in St. Paul, Minnesota. And it's just like this ginormous building. It's super ornate, it's gorgeous, but you look over the entire city. And I had been there a couple of times, but I've never actually been inside. And actually, because of the time that the service was, that I was playing at, I actually got to go to the Mass that was being held in St. Paul's Cathedral. So I walked in, and I was just sitting there, and after everybody had left, it was just me and a few other people, and I just put my hands in my face, and I just wept for like a solid 10, 20 minutes. And I just remember that moment of, God, what happened to me? I was supposed to go out. You called me to be a pastor. You called me to go out and pursue it. What happened to me? Did I blow it? I was trying to be faithful. And I remember I started to get up and I started to walk around. I went to all the other shrines and altars to the other saints and stuff. And I just remember this one thing was just going through my head. How much I wanted to contribute to the kingdom of heaven like these people did. I walked among the likes of St. Patrick, St. Paul, St. Peter, all of these people, and, walked past Mary and all this kind of stuff. And, I'm not Catholic, so I don't really understand all the symbolism, but what I did see was those faces that they had carved. Just remember, these people contributed so much to the kingdom of heaven, how badly I want to join them in that. And I went back and I sat down and I just was praying, and I felt like God spoke to me. He said, I didn't call you to be a worship pastor. And at the time, people had told me, they said, the only way that you will get a job is if you take a youth pastor job, children's pastor job, worship pastor job. You won't get hired as a head pastor. Absolutely no way. But I felt like God told me, he said, I called you to be a shepherd of people. I called you to that. And I remember that moment, I was like, but God, I'm too young. I don't know what's going on. I don't have much experience. But I got back in the car, but I knew for certain God had called me to pastor. So instead of giving up, I said, you know what? I'm going to try to find churches that need a pastor. And God told me, I want you to quit your job. And I want you to take all of your faith and put it in me. All of your chips and put it in on me. I came back and I told my mom, and she was freaking out. She's like, I don't want you to be 30 living in my house. I didn't want to be jobless. I didn't want to have that humiliation. And everybody I talked to, they said, no, you got to just keep your job. Just keep your job. Everybody told me, no, just keep on trying to find a youth pastor job. Just keep on. Man, for me, every single door was closing left and right. But then I got a phone call from a guy named Stephen White, who's another guy in town. He said, hey, there's a church here that needs a pastor, and the Assemblies of God district and I was going to give you a call. He said, I hope that's okay. It's like, you hope? That's awesome. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I interviewed with some different people, and then, I can't remember the date, but Roger and Josh and Jamie all gave me a phone call, and we had an interview. And God just moved in that interview, and it just felt so right to be. And I came up here before the interview, drove around town a little bit. Man, I just got such a burden for this city. And fast forward 1 year after that thing in Minnesota, I was pondering this in my house that I bought. And today I'm preaching in front of my church that I pastor. This is everything I dreamed for. And, we're not done. This isn't just like this victory message, but sometimes God takes you through really tough things to bring you into the place he's called you to. And that moment when I was humiliated on stage, what God taught me was humility. What he taught me was that don't settle for the things that you think are just easy. Because I thought, I could be a worship pastor. It's not that hard. You just grab a guitar, you sing a little bit, you act like you know stuff, and it's good, right? That's all you got to do. But God was like, I'm not calling you to that. That's not you. I created you to pastor people. For me, I feel like I get along with adults better than I do with kids, and I feel like I'd rather preach than do worship. And I had thought maybe that's just my arrogance, maybe that's just me wanting more than I can chew. But God said, that's how I made you. And every door that was shut was teaching me a different lesson. Everything that I have been through at this time has prepared me for this place. God doesn't take a straight line and say from A to B. That's not very fun. That's not very, that's too easy. God will make you jump through hoops. He'll make you go up mountains. He'll make you go down to valleys. He'll have you swim in rivers. He'll have girlfriends and boyfriends break up with you. He'll do those things because he's creating something inside of you. He's creating perseverance. He's producing character inside of you. This is what we're going to be reading in Acts today. We're going to be in Acts chapter 25. Just a little recap, and I try to do a different recap every week because I don't want it to be mundane, and I don't want to insult your intelligence by telling you every single thing that we've read. So basically, there's a guy named Paul, and he's been preaching the gospel. I think we all know that. We've been here a while, but Paul has finally come back to the city of Jerusalem, and after a long extended stay, and he's kind of coming back on a pilgrimage, and all of his political opponents create this riot, and they start to beat him up, and they start to throw him around, and then the Romans have to come and they have to save him from his own people. And then in an effort to understand what's going on, they take him to their own Supreme Court, the Jewish Sanhedrin, and Paul puts his entire argument of his innocence based upon the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He ignores all the other legalese. He just throws himself at Jesus' feet. And then what we see is there's another riot that happens, and they have to take him to the Roman city of Caesarea, where the Roman seat is over the region. And he meets a man named Felix, who is the kind of head prosecutor of everybody. And he comes in and he hears Paul's case. The Jews throw together this really quick, kind of ill-planned attack plan against Paul, and it doesn't go very well. But what we see is Felix doesn't set Paul free. Felix keeps him in jail for an extra 2 years. He keeps an innocent man in jail for 2 years because he was looking for a bribe. He wanted Paul to give him a bribe. He wanted money. He wanted to extort Paul. But just like what Peter and John said to the lame man at the gate, he said, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you." Paul preached the gospel to Felix for 2 straight years. The treasure that Felix was looking for wasn't the one he received. But the one he did receive might just save his life. But Felix rejects it, and after 2 years, he has to leave. And in an effort to make sure that the Jews still like him, he leaves Paul in prison without any further court case to make them happy. So then we're going to open up the passage today in Acts chapter 25, and this is what we're going to, we'll read the last verse of 24 verse. It's going to be 24:27 first. When 10 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, but because Felix wanted to grant the favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. All right, verse 1 of 25. 3 days after arriving in the province, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem, where the chief priests and the Jewish leaders appeared before him and presented the charges against Paul. They requested Festus, as a favor to them, to have Paul transferred to Jerusalem, for they were preparing an ambush to kill him kill him along the way. Verse 4, Festus answered, "Paul is being held at Caesarea, and I myself am going there soon. Let some of your leaders come with me, and if this man has done anything wrong, they can press charges against him there." After spending 8 or 10 days with them, Festus went down from Caesarea to the next day. He convened the court and ordered that Paul be brought before him. When Paul came in, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him. They brought many serious charges against him, but they could not prove them. Then Paul made his defense. "I have done nothing wrong against the Jewish law, against the temple, or against Caesar." Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, says to Paul, "Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on these charges?" All right, we're going to stop there. So Festus is he's a pretty savvy political character. It's in his best interest to keep the Jews on his good side because these are going to be people he's going to be ruling over. He's going to be presiding over them, so he wants to have a good relationship with them, right? But what he is doing here is extremely illegal. If we look at the legalese right now, what's happening is there is a Roman citizen who has had multiple riots against him. His life has been attacked multiple times. He's in the right place. So the way that the Romans would do their court cases is they would bring them to the Roman city to be tried, because they would have a fair court case. It would be a Roman court case because this is a Roman citizen. But because he wants to make the Jews happy, he says, well, hey, maybe you could just go back to Jerusalem. It'll be all good. It'll be all okay. This isn't okay. Paul's a Roman citizen who deserves Roman rights. And he asked Paul, are you willing to give up those rights to go back and be judged by your own people? Paul says, no. No, I've done nothing wrong against the Jews. I've done nothing wrong against the temple. Most importantly, he's done nothing wrong against Caesar, the emperor of the whole world. He's done nothing wrong with them. What we see is with Felix and Festus is this ability to put their own self-interest before justice. And what Luke is trying to get us to see here is how broken this world is. The Jews, on one hand, are completely rejecting their own God. And then on the other hand, the Romans aren't even standing up for their justice system. There's only one righteous person that's in this story. All right, we're going to read verses 10 through 12. And this is what Paul answers. He says, I am now standing before Caesar's court, the highest court that I can, where I ought to be tried. I have done nothing wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know. If, however, I am guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. After Festus had conferred with his council, he declared, you have appealed to Caesar you will go. Paul sees through Festus immediately. He knows what's going on. He understands. He understands that he is getting taken advantage of. First, by a man who wants to extort him for money, and second, a man who wants to extort him for political gains. And as you can see, with verse 11, it says, in verse 10, it says, I've not done anything wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know. So Festus already knows the court case. He's already heard the arguments. Festus knows that this argument, it's trash. This trial shouldn't happen. Paul is obviously innocent. Yet what does he do? He bends over to the Jews, wanting them to like him. So what Paul does is absolutely crazy. Every Roman citizen has the right to appeal to the emperor. This is one of the most sacred rights. So what Paul does is he appeals to Caesar. Instead of staying in Judea, he wants to go to Rome. And if you look back in the book of Acts, we know that this is Paul's plan from the get-go. Paul wanted to go to Jerusalem to hang out with some people and be able to worship the Lord in the temple. But plans changed. Now he's in prison. He's been in prison for 2 years, trying to get back to the place where he wants to go, which is Rome. What Paul sees is this is his only ticket to get to Rome, and he takes it. He wants to bypass everybody else. Before Paul goes off to Rome, we encountered one more player that's significant. He's a cultural figure. We're going to talk about him more next week, but he gets mentioned in this chapter, so we're just going to briefly talk about him. King Agrippa is a puppet king that is installed by Rome to rule over Judea. Rome didn't like always to use their direct power. They liked to raise up local leaders because they would understand the culture. They would understand the customs. So they wanted local leaders to lead over these new provinces. So who we meet is a guy named King Agrippa, who's actually the great-grandson of the man who tried to kill Jesus as a baby, King Herod. So Scripture knows a little bit about this guy. If you've read the Gospels, you'll know who this guy is a little bit. So we're going to read 13 through 22. A few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice, his wife, arrived at Caesarea to pay their respects to Festus. Since they were spending many days there, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. He said, "There's a man here whom Felix left as a prisoner. When I went to Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him and asked him that he be condemned. I told them that it's not the Roman custom to hand over anyone before they have faced the accusers and had an opportunity to defend themselves against the charges. When they came here with me, I did not delay the case, that's a lie, but convened the court the next day and ordered the man to be brought in. When his accusers got up to speak, they did not charge him with any crimes I had expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion, about a dead man named Jesus who Paul claimed to be alive. I was at a loss on how to investigate such matters, so I asked if he would be willing to go to Jerusalem to stand on trial there for these charges. But when Paul made his appeal to be held over for the emperor's decision, I ordered him until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I would like to hear this man myself. He said, tomorrow you will hear him. Again, this is another effort by Festus to try to cozy up to the Jews. But what we continually see throughout this entire story is God working in the background. It's really interesting because when you look at the Jewish response to Christianity, it's hostile. They're fighting against it as much as they can. They're so afraid of it being true. Anybody that is a Christian, they try to insult them in front of people. They try to make sure that the people don't like them. But it's weird because when you look at the Roman response, it's kind of this apathetic yet helpful response. Paul appeals to his Roman citizenship to make sure that he's safe. Again, he asks that he see the emperor himself so that he can get to Rome. Rome even gave him soldiers to guard him. The Roman response to Christianity is apathetic, yet God is using them to meet his means. If you're Paul, you're called to Rome. I need to go there. That's where I'm supposed to be. That's where my heart is. That's where my mission is. Yet I'm stuck in prison for 2 years for nothing I did wrong. Sometimes in life, we go through tough things that prevent us from going where we want to go. But God, at no point in this story, is apathetic. At no point in this story is he unaware. At every single point, God knows what's going on. God is using this pagan Rome to meet his own needs. And it's also a rebuke. This whole book is a rebuke against the Jewish people, saying, my people won't even help me in my cause. This is from God. So he's going to use a pagan people to meet his needs. This is a tough rebuke for the people to understand. But we need to understand this, church. God is not done with you. He's not done working. If he has called you to a place, like that song we sang, that Waymaker, he's a promise keeper. If he has called you to a place, he will not do it. He will do it. He keeps his promises. Even when there's mountains, even when there's valleys, even when there's deserts, he keeps his promises. He told the Israelites back in the day that they would go to the promised land. And they walked around for 40 years. God kept his promise. God kept his promise. God promised the King David that he would rule and reign forever. His descendants would. Yet his descendants, they were troubled. His descendants rejected the God that had put them there. Yet God was faithful because he brought up a man named Jesus who would be the king of everybody. And that king's coming back, and he's going to be sitting on the throne of all of us. God will keep his promises. If you look at the world today, it's messed up. It's horrible. There's so many things that I've read this past week that have made me weep. Made me weep about our country. Made me weep about the brokenness of the world. But it's easy to forget who God is. It's easy to forget that he's working, that he's moving. Church, he's called us to this place. He's called us to this people. He's called us to Charles City. We have people from Nashua. We have people from Floyd in our church. We have people from Green. God's not done with this area. God's not done with this place. And he is calling us to move. And he's calling us to minister to these people who are broken. Like I said at the beginning of service, God has called us to the dark places. He has called us to the broken hearts. Plans might change, right? COVID is spiking back up. There might be a day when we have to go back fully online. There might be a day that we have to do that. There might be a day when the government rages against the church full-heartedly. We can already see this happening in California. They banned worship services, and now they've banned in-home Bible studies. You can look and say, oh, well, there's no excuses anymore. The church is getting persecuted. But in the midst of persecution, we still have to move. We still have to work. And I believe that God is going to use the persecution against us for our benefit, because he's going to be teaching us things throughout. Hard things that we go through in this life are preparing us to be the person we need to be for the future. That person that I was when I went up to Minnesota, that's not the same person that's preaching in front of you today. God changed me to become the pastor of this church. He created me to be the pastor of this church. He created you for your own mission field to do exactly what you've been called to do. So many tough things that we've been through in this life are creating in us a new character to be able to minister in the future. So church, all I can say to you today is buy into the process. Buy in. When things start to suck, you need to buy in. When things start to get hard, you need to buy in, because God's working through it. He's using that. He's using all of those trials for your benefit, to creating in you a new person that can do the things you've been called to. This is our mission, church. We got to save the world. We're not doing it by ourselves, and we can't. We're people. You can't raise dead men to life. We can't do that, but God can. And he's called us to walk amongst the dead and be with them. He's called us to walk into dark places, because there's a light in here. It's a bright, shining light that can't go dim. Now, yes, you have to feed it, and yes, don't go off by yourself. We can trip up and we can get hurt. But church, I'm going to tell you right now, we can't lose. We've already won. What we're in right now is, we're in the battle. We haven't seen victory yet, but we know it's coming. For us, there's no reason to give up. There's no reason to throw in the towel. We know we're going to win. So let's go save as many people as we can. God has called you to reach your own people that he's put yourself in. That's all we have for this morning. But let's just pray together. When things get tough and we get imprisoned for 2 years, let's understand God is still at work and he's still moving. Jesus, we come before you and we just say, just once again, very humbly, thank you. There's not a lot of churches that have the ability to do what we're doing right now. God, we're able to meet, we're able to worship, we're able to go out in our communities and play worship music at the amphitheater. We're able to have a worship service in the middle of the city. Not everybody can say that, not everybody can do that. So God, we're thankful. We're thankful that you chose this church to be able to have the influence that we do. God, moving forward, we want to move with your Spirit. God, we don't want to be afraid of the dark, but we want to take the light into the darkness. Jesus, we're so excited for what you're going to do in this place. God, just help us to buy in today into what you've called us to do. In your name we pray. Amen. Yeah. Yeah, give God a clap. Yeah, give God a clap. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to Amazing Grace Church. Don't feel like you have to rush out the door. We're already here, so might as well hang out, right? Pray that you guys would have a blessed day, and man, keep your head up. Even though things are going to get hard, things are going to get harder. Just keep your head up. Everything's going to be okay. All right. Have a nice day, everybody.